really not knowing what to say or how to say it at this point, I think, is the best way to put it.
John, of paramount concern, of course, is the fate of the 7 people aboard the spacecraft. Bearing in mind that we have very little information, let's go for a second with what we have. Do we know at what height the craft exploded?
I have no information at all on that. All I can say is that because it was such a clear day and you could just see for miles, it was certainly in full view when it happened. And I have no idea what kind of height that would have been. It did not seem to be that far out over the water when it happened because of the trajectory of the liftoff. It seemed that it was carrying it almost, well, straight up from our vantage point. A little, obviously not, but a little over the ocean. And at that point, you could still see it in full view. And then all of a sudden, what, you know, at first you might have thought were separation of boosters, but of course we know that that doesn't take place that early on in the mission. The shuttle had just made its roll and was on its way upward, and then suddenly that explosion. But again, it was in full view, so it certainly could not have been at a very, very high altitude when it happened, and certainly could not have been very, very far downrange.
The weather this morning.
NASA right now as to exactly where parts of the spacecraft fell. They were reporting it fell at 28.64 north latitude and 80.28 degrees west longitude, just a few miles off Cape Canaveral.
That would make very, very good sense, Marianne. That's exactly what it seemed like here. Pieces of debris, of course, falling back into the ocean, and you could see them falling. And, you know, again, not knowing what it was that was falling off, but knowing entirely throughout the entire few moments after it happened that this was not right. You knew that it wasn't that far downrange or that high in altitude when it happened. I don't know, obviously, how far out, but certainly, again, reiterate, it does not seem like it was at a very, very high altitude or very out in the far out, and it would seem to indicate that they can get to the debris fairly quickly. Of course, recovery ships are always standing by. And again, going back to a point we made earlier, if this had been something they had practiced for, something that they could have aborted and come back to Kennedy Space Center, I'm sure they would have done that. It just seems at this point that it was an unforeseen cataclysmic tragedy that may have befallen us here today, and that there was no way to make any kind of emergency preparations to come back to KSC with the shuttle itself at this point.
John, we will stand by at the Kennedy Space Center. Let's go back now about 5 hours ago when the 7 members of the shuttle crew were entering in to the spacecraft. Here you see 37-year-old New Hampshire teacher Christy McAuliffe preparing to...
Good morning, Judy.
Judy Resnick on the intercom. She's already inside the shuttle. On the left, you see 39-year-old Ellison Onizuka. For those of you who may just be joining us, the 25th Space Shuttle mission has apparently ended in tragedy in a huge fireball in the sky. Apparently, the solid rocket booster exploded about 9 miles downrange. The $1.2 billion spacecraft, only one of 4 in the fleet. This was only the second of a record 15 shuttle flights NASA had planned for this year. NASA says the explosion occurred about 60 seconds into the flight, where they were preparing to throttle their engines up to maximum thrust. They had throttled them down to the 60% level at about 35 seconds in order to reduce the forces of gravity during the liftoff.
Throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go with throttle up.
The explosion occurred at a time when Challenger was to enter a period of the maximum stress, when wind and other atmospheric conditions could place the maximum force on the outside of the vehicle. There you see the huge fireball and 2 solid rockets trailing white smoke. That is one of the solid rockets there. After the explosion, we could not see the orbiter itself. Apparently exploded in little pieces. and only the two solid rockets floated down. This is a live picture off the Florida coast at the Kennedy Space Center from one of NASA's helicopters. We cannot see any of the rescue efforts underway. They apparently are heading down downrange. Let's go to the White House now and Larry speak.
And shocked at what he has just seen replayed on television concerning the shuttle launch. We do not have any more information than is being provided to the public at this time. The way the President found out about it is he was in the Oval Office with a group of senior staff preparing for some questions with a group of network correspondents and anchors that were having lunch in the White House today regarding the budget and the State of the Union. The Vice President and the Foreign Policy Advisor, John Poindexter, came in with others and informed the President that the news had just broken. We immediately adjourned our Oval Office meeting and went into an adjoining room, the President's study, where there's a television, and the President then began to review television reports of the explosion there shortly after the launch. So once again, the President is concerned, he is saddened, he is very anxious to have more information on it. At the moment, as I say, we're learning most of our information from what the public is getting.
What is your best information as to the condition of the crew, Larry, at this point?
We don't have any more information than what is being provided to the public on television. Hopefully later we will be able to get some, and that's the President's first priority, is to find out what information that is available. We just don't have any more. No, we have not from the Oval Office.
Will this affect in any way the plans for the State of the Union tonight?
I don't believe so. I'm certain that the President will feel compelled to mention this, depending on the outcome of what we learn here in a few minutes.
Will it affect the shuttle program, Larry?
Well, that's hard to say, you know, here in 15 or 20 minutes after an incident of this type is concerned. I'm sure it will not affect the United States' determination to consider to continue the exploration of space and all the benefits we've received from it. While this is indeed tragic, it certainly will not deter the United States in its interest in space exploration.
All the problems that the shuttle has had, will any substantial reevaluation be done of the program itself?
Well, once again, you're very premature in asking a question concerning the future of the space program. The United States has met adversity many times before in the space program. It is one of the most effective and successful programs of that type that any country has ever undertaken.
Larry, can you tell us anything specifically that the President said, any quotations, and did he make any mention of the fact that the teacher that he suggested, that the program of a teacher in space, that teacher was on board this flight?
Well, I know that was on his mind. Quite frankly, the President stood there in almost stunned silence as he watched the television. You could certainly read the concern, the sorrow, the anxiety on his face as he watched, and the group watched around him. As I say, he was virtually watched in silence.
Might anyone from the White House be leading some sort of investigating team, or will it just be up to NASA to investigate this?
All this is very, very early, and there's just nothing we can say. Our immediate concern is the crew, and all of these other questions will just have to be deferred until much later.
Was anything said about the fact that the teacher was on board this plane?
Well, it was something that was on all of our minds, that we did have the first teacher in space, really the first civilian, so to speak, other than our members of Congress who have flown in space, and certainly that's on our mind.
Are there any scientific aides who have been able to say that they could survive such an explosion?
Just don't have that kind of information yet.
You said that the Vice President, Admiral Poindexter, informed the President. How did the White House learn about it?
I'm certain that we probably learned it from the news media, as we do many times when incidents like this occur unexpectedly.
Might this influence the decision about whether other civilians will be allowed on the shuttle from now on, Larry?
Once again, all of these questions, our immediate concern is for the fate of the crew, to find out exactly what has happened to those 7 people aboard. All of these other questions we'll just have to wait till later. Dale?
Tell us anything about what the president's schedule, how the president's schedule is changing now?
The president's schedule has not changed. He will keep on with what he had planned today and the State of the Union tonight. And once again, I think the only change in his schedule would be to simply be updated and try to seek the facts in this.
Will the president be making a phone call to the family, Larry?
I just don't know. It customarily does, but we're going to wait till we find out what the facts are.
Larry, he watched in silence, but were there no quotes that you could give us?
Nothing. It was virtually in silence.
Are you going to know what's being done now, Larry, in terms of searching for...
No. All of that information we just do not have yet. Dale, you had one question and you want to go? Okay.
What are your plans? What are your plans about briefing the rest of the afternoon on that?
Well, I think once we find out what the facts are and particularly what the fate of the crew is, then we'll be prepared to say something.
Larry, did you detect any sign of emotion as the president watched? Was he shaking his head, his eyes moist?
Concern, anxiety, silence.
All right, you're looking at a live picture off the Kennedy Space Center from what looks like the vantage point on the vehicle assembly building. Let's go back in time now about 20 minutes as Challenger was ready for liftoff as the last few seconds ticked off the clock.
We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Roger, roll, Challenger. Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading down range.
Liftoff this morning at 11:38 after a couple of delays for several hours.
4%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%.
The family of Krista McAuliffe, the first civilian and the first school teacher ever to be launched into space aboard a shuttlecraft, was at the Kennedy Space Center watching today's liftoff. This is not only, of course,
2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3
let's watch
miles, downrange
as we see what happens.
Engines throttling up, 3 engines now at 104%. Challenger, go with throttle up. Challenger, go with throttle up.
Close fight!
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
This is a slow motion replay of the explosion. In looking at the slow motion replay, you could see flames break out. There you see one of the solid rocket boosters careening off to the right, still erupting a long tail of flame behind it. In the center of the fire and the smoke, you can't see any form of what was once the shuttle. The one solid rocket booster still moving off to the right. A little later, you can see the other solid rocket go to the left.
We are still not clear as yet, Tom, exactly what was parachuting down here.
We're not clear, but we know that a C-130 was in the area, and that
Space shuttle as it took off this morning. This is the orbiter, the Space Shuttle Challenger. The liquid fuel is in the large tank. The solid rocket boosters off to the side. The shuttle, of course, has 3 engines of its own. The solid rocket boosters and the shuttle's own 3 engines all have to be at full throttle for the liftoff. Then the commander throttles back to about 60-65% of full throttle and then has to throttle forward again. And it was that second throttle forward at just after he had done that, that the explosion occurred. Here was the launch this morning from Cape Canaveral, Florida.
2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Roger, roll, Challenger. Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles for most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up. 3 engines now at 104%. Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up. 1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
Half an hour after the explosion, a serpentine trail of white smoke. It was twisted by the upper wind, and that smoke remained in the cold, clear sky, marking the path of the shuttle's wreckage. The explosion occurred about the time the shuttle was to enter a period of maximum aerodynamic pressure. Wind and other atmospheric conditions placed the maximum force on the outside of the space vehicle. And now what happened in slow motion detail. You'll want to look first for what may have been a couple of little vapor indications of flame. You can begin to see them shortly. This is about 60 seconds into the launch, if you will, and then the larger explosion. You see what appears to be vapor flames at the base and the left-hand side of the screen. Now the main fuel tank begins to ignite and explode. As we wait for President Reagan to address the American people, you will note in the upper right-hand quarter of your screen, what appears to be an entire, or almost entire, there it is, upper quarter of the screen, piece of what is believed to be the right solid rocket fuel booster. Now, when Leo Krupp was saying a few minutes ago that those boosters are supposed to parachute into the sea and are possibly recoverable, you can see how that large a piece of debris, if it can be found, might indeed be.
This is truly a national loss. 19 years ago, almost to the day, we lost 3 astronauts in a terrible accident on the ground. But we've never lost an astronaut in flight. We've never had a tragedy like this. And perhaps we've forgotten the courage it took for the crew of the shuttle. But they, the Challenger 7, were aware of the dangers, but overcame them and did their jobs brilliantly. We mourn 7 heroes: Michael Smith, Dick Scobie, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Gregory Jarvis, and Krista Mikhailoff. We mourn their loss as a nation together. To the families of the 7, we cannot bear, as you do, the full impact of this tragedy. But we feel the loss, and we're thinking about you so very much. Daring and brave.
Give you information.
Had that special grace, that special spirit that says, give me a challenge, and I'll meet it with joy. They had a hunger to explore the universe and discover its truths. They wished to serve, and they did. They served all of us. We've grown used to wonders in this century. It's hard to dazzle us. But for 25 years, the United States space program has been doing just that. We've grown used to the idea of space, and perhaps we forget that we've only just begun. We're still pioneers. They, the members of the Challenger crew, were pioneers. And I want to say something to the school children of America who were watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave. The Challenger crew was pulling us into the future, and we'll continue to follow them. I've always had great faith in and respect for our space program, and what happened today does nothing to diminish it. We don't hide our space program. We don't keep secrets and cover things up. We do it all up front and in public. That's the way freedom is, and we wouldn't change it for a minute. We'll continue our quest in space. There will be more shuttle flights and more shuttle crews, and yes, more volunteers, more civilians, more teachers in space. Nothing ends here. Our hopes and our journeys continue. I want to add that I wish I could talk to every man and woman who works for NASA or who worked on this mission and tell them your dedication and professionalism have moved and impressed us for decades, and we know of your anguish. We share it. There's a coincidence today. On this day, 390 years ago, the great explorer Sir Francis Drake died aboard ship off the coast of Panama. In his lifetime, the great frontiers were the oceans, and a historian later said he lived by the sea, died on it, and was buried in it. Well, today, we can say of the Challenger crew, their dedication was, like Drake's, complete. The crew of the Space Shuttle Challenger honored us for the manner in which they lived their lives. We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them, this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God. Thank you.
Speaking from the Oval Office, President Reagan evoking the memories of
blast off. Time and time again, the shuttle had gone off, leaving behind a stunning trail of smoke and fire. This time was different. This time, as eyes followed it on its way to the heavens, something went wrong.
3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up. 3 engines now at 104%.
Challenger, go at throttle up. Challenger, go at throttle up.
1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles.
At first, it was thought it was just the booster rocket separating from the craft. But a closer look showed it was indeed the entire space plane that had become a cloud of smoke. Mission Control said debris fell several miles in the Atlantic. Recovery forces sped to the rescue. But NASA conceded there was probably no human life to retrieve. The 7-member crew had waited since Sunday for this mission. Among the astronauts, schoolteacher Krista McAuliffe from New Hampshire, specially picked and specially trained for the much-envied ride into space. Her parents watched from the VIP site not far away. They hugged and sobbed. Anyone who watched was moved. 55 manned space missions had made it without an in-flight disaster. The 56th was not so lucky. Mike Cavanaugh, CNN.
In that VIP viewing area, 3.5 miles from the launch site, there was a small army of well-wishers. Krista McAuliffe's sister was among them.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
proud moment turned into one of stark horror as the giant fireball exploded miles above her.
Fuel cells, trigger APUs. Challenger, go with throttle up. Challenger, go with throttle up. 1 minute, 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude.
At the school where Krista McAuliffe taught, Concord High School in Concord, New Hampshire, students had gathered in the cafeteria and that auditorium to watch the launch. The initial response was happiness and pride. The end result was shocking.
Everyone was cheering, you know, because we saw the launch. You know, when we saw it go up, and everyone's like, yeah, we're with you all the way, Krista. And then when we came back, some girls say it just blew up. We're like, what? No, you're kidding us. We go in there, and it was silent. And everybody's got their eyes on the TV. We're like, oh my God, it did happen.
Students at the school were sent home about an hour after the disaster occurred. NASA officials still don't know what caused the shuttle to explode. At a new